Hello there, Dark Humility here. You can always catch me at twitch.tv/Dark Humility for 6 to 7 days a week of Diablo 2 action, PD2 and D2R. We do it all. We make every manner of build. We do all content. We smash it. I'm going to show you guys how to make all kinds of awesome builds. We have tons of build guides on Maxroll, d2.maxroll.gg, and on YouTube for both PD2 and D2R. Today, on the Season 5 Hardcore live server for Project Diablo 2, we have another special build guide in line with two-handed hardcore. This is the two-handed hardcore season. Have not used a shield, and this is yet another build that does not use a shield. Now we're going melee though, so he's not using a staff. He could use a staff though. Rib cracker is definitely something that's possible. However, we're going to be using some extremely solid items in Season 5. It's very possible in the future that maybe other weapons like Tomb Reaver and Rib Cracker, which are still also very good, can be effective. However, we will be talking about this character's stats, skills, mercenary, gear, and then we're going to be doing demos and maps and various Uber bosses. So we'll be doing it all. This is a Fury Druid. So a Fury Maul, two-handed Maul using Druid. He is incredibly strong at what he does. This is arguably one of the strongest Uber Killers in Project Diablo 2 in Season 5. So, while we will not be demoing Declone and Rathma today, this character is also fully capable of it as well. Maybe we'll get a video of us doing that at some point in the future here, but it is a crazy build just in general. So let's go over the skills. We got level 93 Bloops here. You might recognize this character from previous guides. I'm literally just respecking him and putting on different gear, which is awesome stuff. In general though, you want to make sure you have enough strength to wear your gear, including swaps and whatnot. If I swap out some different gear here, he's even able to use the non-eth Windhammer. If I had better jewels, believe it or not, non-eth Windhammer could be better than the eth one. I am working on that, but that could be something we can get. In general though, you just want really high damage. A high consistent damage is good for the life leech, so Windhammer is going to be very good for that. You're going to want enough strength to wear your gear. The Maul is what costs the most strength for the most part. There's definitely a lot of different options though. Dexterity, you can put some extra points into Dexterity if you want a little bit more attack rating, but you can just have the minimum to wear your gear. Vitality. You're going to want to max out, pretty much put the rest of your points into Vitality after that, and no points into Energy. Resistances against Uber bosses, it is important to have stacked resistances to some extent, and it does help in survivability and maps to some extent as well, even though I feel like if you're mapping with the Fury Druid, you're mostly going to be worried about physical damage. However, this build that I have going on here, you know, has a couple of different swap outs, and there's definitely like GCs to swap out to, which I'll show you. And he can be used for pretty much any purpose in the game. So this build, unlike maybe some previous builds which aren't really tooled for Ubers very well, they're really good at mapping and whatnot, this build can do anything. It's not the fastest mapper in the world though. I would definitely say his strengths definitely lie in Ubers. However, he's pretty fast, and we'll definitely show that off here today. Anyway, so having stacked res in hardcore is a good idea. Damage reduction, have about 25% or so. There's definitely some pretty decent options to get higher DR. Instead of using damage in your armor, we can get closer to 50%. I think if you're mapping, you're going to want to have 50%, maybe even 100% curse reduction as well. This build isn't really made 100% for mapping, it's kind of all-purpose, but yeah, we'll explain that here in a moment. In general though, you want as much DR as possible. 52 hit recovery, or as close to that 50% cap as possible. 42 hit recovery, so You can hit the 86, but I'd recommend having at least 42 hit recovery on a two-handed build. 155 attack speed, that is a very important stat there. There are 2 frames below this as well. If you hit 90, you can hit a pretty decent frame, and I believe if you hit, I think, 125, you're also hitting a pretty decent attack speed frame as well. Anything 90 or higher is pretty good. However, once you hit 155, you are at max attack speed, and you attack extremely rapidly and do crazy amounts of DPS in a very short amount of time. Windhammer is definitely one of the really good options for this. Of course, there's also other options as well, but just in general, for like the lower attack speed breakpoints, I should say. Like I said, Tomb Reaver does really well, and Rib Cracker as well, but you can't hit quite as high of attack speed. It's still very powerful though. In the future though, I wouldn't be too surprised if this item might even be nerfed, because it is incredibly powerful if you get 5 or 6 socket Windhammers and get up to 155 attack speed. Alright, so that being said, and that includes non-ethereal and ethereal versions. So Deadly Strike is good too, Critical Strike would be good. Crushing Blow definitely helps against Uber bosses. It gets them down to 2/3 HP extremely fast, and allows you to finish them off without too much difficulty. Having some source of Crushing Blow at least is good. Open Wounds is going to be good against Uber bosses as well, to some extent, especially the mini Ubers that regen. And Life Leech is provided by Feral Rage, but you can have additional Life Leech, and having some Mana Leech on the gear is also nice too. So all those things are pretty good stats. Just in general, defensive stats, sustained stats, and damage, and things that are able to grant a lot of damage are going to be very key on this build. Alright, so let's go over skills real quick. Skills are pretty easy. In general, you're just going to want Max Fury, Max Feral Rage, which is a synergy, but it also, Fury is also a synergy for Feral Rage. You use Feral Rage, which lasts 30 seconds to boost up your run walk speed, your lifesteal, your damage. You're definitely going to want to have this procced at all times. You might have to refresh it every 30 seconds, so it's going to be very important. But it's also a synergy for Fury itself, which allows you to get even more damage. You're also going to want to max Werewolf for physical and magic damage reduction. And you're going to want to have damage and high attack speed as well. And it also helps a ton with the percent life, lycanthropy, doing that as well. So you're going to want to max lycanthropy and werewolf. All 4 of these skills, 100%, you're going to want to max those. You're not going to want to do anything in the elemental tree because you're not teleporting. You can't teleport in shapeshift form anyway. And you don't have enough plus skills to really make things like Cyclone Armor worth it, so I wouldn't bother. And then this is where it really kind of depends on what functions. So like I said, this character is kind of all-purpose. If you're doing like Declone or Rathma, you're going to want to make sure that you're like maxing out your Oak Sage, right? And then if you want 2 spirits with Spirit Keeper, you know, you can have 1 point into Heart of the Wolverine, or put in the rest of them as you approach level 99. And then you have a pretty good Heart of the Wolverine and Oak Sage, and you don't do anything with Vines pretty much at all. Or at all, I should say. If you're mapping, you can also go you can go 1 into each of these summons as well. However, you don't have a lot of plus skills on this build in the summon tree because you're not going for plus skills, you're going for damage, physical damage stats. Plus skills don't really help you all that much on this build. So in general, you can go these, but they won't survive very long. They can help you survive some very dangerous situations though in mapping as well. In my case, I just went max Heart of the Wolverine. I'm relying on the Oak Sage from Nature's Peace, so I just maxed this out. And I went on to Carrion Vine, which can help us sustain a little bit while mapping. However, this build is also mostly just used for Ubers, so it just kind of depends. This is kind of like I said, there's a lot of different approaches. If you're mapping though, having a Carrion Vine for some extra sustain isn't bad. And if you're feeling like that you're doing enough damage, you can definitely focus a lot more into Oak Sage instead of accepting a level 5 Oak Sage from Nature's Peace, and you can go some extra summons. This is definitely the core though. You want to make sure you have 80 here, so there's definitely some options here depending on how you're using a Fury Shapeshift Druid, whether you're playing hardcore or softcore. I do try to make my guides for both hardcore and softcore, but yes. Alright, so the Mercenary is also... There's a lot of different things you could do with it. There's definitely a lot of different types of Mercenaries you could use. I would definitely recommend either an Act 2 or an Act 5 Mercenary on this build for the most part. You could definitely go maybe Act 3 for cleansing if you wanted curse immunity, but Act 5 would be really good, especially the one with the Battle Cry and Whirlwind and the one that gives you Bow, because it would reduce enemies' physical res on demand, and you could also put on a Beast on him and a Templars, and you can get Might and Fanaticism. So that would be a pretty good Mercenary, but the one I'm going to go over today is a bit more defensive and is what I would consider to be useful in more scenarios, especially for a hardcore version of the build. So this is a Defiance Mercenary, Act 2. It's going to give us 9% extra DR, which means that we can put more damage on the actual build itself and not have to worry about necessarily needing tons of DR. And if he survives in the Uber scenarios, he's very, very useful. As you can see here, he's got a crap ton of damage himself as well. He's got high resistances, he's got high defense, and he's giving us more than just the Defiance Aura. For this build, he's giving us Concentration Aura, level 19 Concentration Aura, level 6 Might. This can go up to 8, so this is kind of just a decent Templars. And this is a pretty solid Pride. I rolled this myself, I puzzle boxed this myself. And we have some pretty decent items there. And then just, you know, whatever Vampire Gaze, 19 PDR, more PDR, more Life Leech, attack speed, and some additional resistances, making sure to get some resistances in there. So that the resistances are pretty solid for both mapping and Uber situations. I will admit though he could use more resistances, especially for stacking against Uber Mephisto. That is a bit of a weakness there, so if you want to like have him survive things like Uber Mephisto, you got to do that. He won't survive Rathmer or Declone anyway. However, he can survive Uber Ancients, which is something I will also be demoing here on this build today. And there are ways to help him survive that more, such as maximum light res and other things of that nature. Anyway, that's pretty basic. I mean, and just in general, in the Mercenary, you want DR, you want resistances, you do want damage auras. So in the case of the Act 2 Mercenary, you're not going to be going Fanaticism. One reason why Fanaticism isn't needed on a Wolf, though, is that you don't get attack speed from the Fanaticism, you only get attack speed from your weapon. So having Concentration, which also gives you extra damage and AR and whatnot, is actually really solid. So don't worry about using Pride in this case. Having Concentration and Might, I would even say, is more effective than Might and Fanaticism, especially considering that the level of the Fanaticism Aura, the Concentration Aura itself, is a lot higher than the Fanaticism Aura can be with a Beast. It's also about the same cost as a Beast, given that a Beast costs Burr Runes, so it doesn't really matter. So like if you add up Cham, Sur, and Low together, they equal about the same. So in case you're concerned about cost, that's another good thing to consider there. Alright. Weapons, I would say hands down, currently the best weapon would be like a non-ethereal Windhammer, 6-socketed, which is what this is, but like stuff full of 15 40 joules except for one shale because you need to hit 155 attack speed. Non-ethereal, strangely enough, because the minimum and maximum damage are so close together and the maximum damage isn't very high, the non-ethereal one can actually theoretically get more damage currently than the F one. That can change in future seasons, but that is the way it is. Currently though, my F1 is stronger because it's really hard to find those crazy jewels on hardcore. Definitely a bit more plentiful on softcore. However, the F1 is really close to the maximum damage you can get on a non-F1 with really good jewels anyway, so it doesn't really matter. An F1 with 6 sockets, you can use a vial pretty easily to achieve this as well. and then you'll be good to go. But for the F one, you will need a Zod rune because it is not indestructible by nature, and you'll have to stuff in 4 Shale runes, and you can only put in 1 attack speed ED jewel. That's just how it has to be done, period. And yeah, it's pretty awesome stuff. You need 155 attack speed to hit that max frame, which is why Windhammer is used so often on this build. Like I said though, Tomb Reaver and Rib Cracker are also good options. Maybe a bit more budget options in case you can't make insane weapons like these. Even this Noneth version though that I have is still very similar in damage to this one, and it feels pretty similar. This build is just that solid of a build. Alright, so armor, there are different options for the armor for sure. You could go Tyrael's Might. There's different ways to get tons of ED on that. Fortitude, I would say, is one of the cheaper options that provides you with a lot of damage, life, all resistances, some flat DR, and in addition to that, maximum light res, which can be helpful against things like Uber Mephisto, and for Uber Ancients with Madoc. So overall, it's a pretty solid option for this build, and it's a cheap option too for the most part. An even cheaper option though would be Stone. Stone would give you more defense, more FHR, allow you to hit the 86 FHR breakpoint, and gives you res as well. So there's other solid options there. Against Declone and Rathma, arguably the best option might be Gladiator's Vein for the critical strike and the fact that it has a lot of flat DR and MDR, which kind of stack on top of the Werewolf, which already gives you some of those stats to begin with. And it gives you crit strike and FHR as well. Declone, also things like Shaft Stop are really good for a lot of percent DR. In case you want to get closer to 50 DR for mapping or declone, Shaft Stop and Leviathan will also be good with multiple sockets. So those are also going to be solid options. The reason why Leviathan could be pretty good on this build is because your weapon requires so much strength anyway that Leviathan requires a lot of strength, but it gives you extra strength to actually help you wear your weapon. So you can definitely go those options and it would be pretty solid. Shaft Stop has maybe more life overall, but that's you have to have a really good Shaft Stop. I mean, if you have a really good Leviathan, it would take a really good Shaft Stop to beat it, so it's still pretty solid in that regard. Helms, there's definitely a lot of different options here. You can go Jalal's Main, which is just highly defensive and well-rounded. You can go Cerebus Bite. You can even go the new one, Ursa's Nightmare. Cerebus Bite is good for Deadly Strike, by the way, so that could give you some Deadly Strike. Ursa's Nightmare can give you a ton of maximum life. However, it will totally nuke your ability to leech life, which can really suck in mapping scenarios. But it could be pretty cool in some scenarios. However, what I'm using is arguably the best well-rounded option for like doing Ubers and things like Diablo Clone and Rathma. That is because it gives so much Sorb and maximum res in addition to giving you FHR, allowing you to summon an additional spirit, which can allow you to have the AR and damage bonus of Heart of the Wolverine while having Oak Sage, or vice versa if you want to go a bit heavier on the damage in the case of my current approach. And you can get an even better one with like 2 to Oak Sage and like 2 skills and whatnot. So this one's decent. It's a pretty rare item though, so it's hard to get a good one. This one has maximum cold res, which can be especially useful against things like Diablo Clone. So that's pretty nice. Definitely have Atmas. So the Helm, there's definitely a lot of good options, but Spirit Keeper just gives you so many nice defensive stats against Ubers, so that's why I'm using it. I have a 3-socketed Jalal's as well in my stash though, so you can definitely check that out. I would say there's 3 different options for the amulet, and it really just depends on what you're doing. So there's High Lords, Atmas, I guess maybe 4 options. You could also use Saracens, which gives you ED and res. And then you can use Metal Grid. And Metal Grid arguably is actually the best way to tackle things like Declone and Rathma, because you really just want that attack rating and that all res. That's really the challenging component there. However, Atmas against standard Ubers and things like mapping and whatnot to lower monster resistance is really good. You don't need attack speed on it. I would say you'd mostly be using the High Lords for the Deadly Strike. So that's good for the Deadly Strike. Atmas, you use it for the negative res reduction, which is good against Ubers and mapping and things of that nature. And then Metal Grid, which is really solid against things like Declone and Rathma. And then, like I said, Saracens is kind of just an all-rounded approach that gives you even more enhanced damage. So that can be nice for just boosting your damage and res simultaneously. Alright. And then Soul Drainers, especially considering you don't need attack speed on this anywhere else in this build except for the weapon. I don't think there's just any other option that's better than this. You just want your negative physical res somewhere. So I think this is just what you should be using, is Soul Drainer. Life, ED on both of them, pretty solid. Gore Rider is kind of a similar thing. You know, you get Crushing Blow, you get Deadly Strike, you get Open Wounds, and you get Faster Unwalk. So that's really solid too. Having like maximum reses on this can be useful against Declone and Rathma and whatnot, but it's pretty much the same thing. Life or enhanced damage or res on Soul Drainers are just really good. I think in most cases on this build, especially considering once again you don't need attack speed, so Nosferatu's Coil is kind of out of the question. I would use Verdungos, especially on the hardcore version of this build. You could use Nos Coil, you could use String of Ears as well if you're lacking Life Leech or you just want more Life Leech and you want some more flat MDR. But because it gives you so much vitality, which scales really well with Werewolf and Lycanthropy, Lycanthropy scales really well with life, so things like Verdungos or just anything that gives you life like this is going to be really good. Rings, there's like a bunch of different rings you could use, really. You could use max damage dual leech rings, you could use like max damage life rings with res and stuff like that. You can use lots of crafted rings. Anything with like leeches and AR and damage and res and that kind of stuff. However, you can definitely go solid approaches. In this case, my build needs cannot be frozen somewhere, and I'm getting it off of the Ravenfrost. This is a very good Ravenfrost with AR corruption. I corrupted myself. 359 AR is solid stuff. I think the maximum AR you can get on a ring period or on a Ravenfrost is 400. That's with a maximal Ravenfrost plus a really good roll in the corruption itself. So this one got a really good AR corruption on top of an already good amount of attack rating. So this is really doing our attack rating for us on this build. Normally, this is why I don't have Metal Grid, because like with Metal Grid you're mostly trying to get that for the attack rating, but Atmas can also give attack rating. There's other stuff that just helps with that in general, which is really good. So yeah, that's good stuff. And then Nature's Peace, some more flat MDR is actually kind of nice, in addition to 3-2-3-3, so that's pretty solid in this regard for sure. This Nature's Peace is very good. So yeah, I think in general, this is going to be really nice, and it's just really solid. Getting all that max res is really good for the Ubers, and it's even better for things like Rathma and Declone. Allowing you to tank just a lot more in general, and yeah, having that flat MDR and DR on top of the stats that you already have elsewhere is really good. So yeah, as you can see, we actually have a lot of flat DR. We actually have 34 flat DR on this character in addition to 25% damage reduction. So he's got a pretty decent amount of damage mitigation, and with Gladiator's Bane you could actually have even more, so it's kind of nuts. So on the swap, you just go CTA and Lidless Wall. There's not really anything too magical about my swap in Season 5. Yeah, you can't like stack like Heart of the Wolverine using Oaths or anything anymore, so it's kind of whatever. Same thing as you'd probably expect in LOD or D2R even. And then for charms, this is kind of an all-purpose. On melee builds, I kind of like to mix and match different charms. Shapeshifting charms are really good, though, on a shapeshifter over maybe max damage, AR, life, and whatnot, because they also help with the life just that much more, and they also help with the damage. So they're very well balanced, especially if you can get lifers. And so I also have a lot of res here to help with Uber bosses. I have an AR 41 lifer, which is very good for Uber bosses as well. I have an FHR, almost a perfect FHR AR GC, which is helping us get that FHR. So in general, it's just a lot of things that kind of help out. But you can of course have FHR shapeshifting GCs. I have more that I'm going to be putting on here when I swap out some gear for various Uber bosses and whatnot. That's pretty much how it goes. And then we have an Annihilus and a Torch, and you know, of course you could use a Tainted Worldstone Shard if you have one and augment the ante further. I don't have that currently, but that is what we're working with. So yeah, damage auras, lots of damage reduction, negative enemy physical res. That's really the key to that amp damage there, and we'll show that in action, of course. But in general, this build is very good, and the Fury Druid can do practically anything. I could do some LOD area demos, but I'm gonna be honest, if you're willing to invest in this character, LOD areas are probably like, you know, they're too weak for what this character is capable of. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna demo him in some maps real quick just to show you guys his damage. And we're not even gonna pre-buff him right this second here. But we were gonna just cut these maps down so you can see just how much damage we do. It's so much damage, especially with a maul of this caliber. But you definitely don't need something that crazy. You can go for 5 or 6 socket Windhammer. And it can even be non-ethereal. At least in this season. You know, it's possible that nerfs might require... Ow. Yeah, we got dull in this map. Gotta be a little careful. It's Worldstone Shard. Just make sure to keep your barrel rage up every once in a while. As you can see though, this character just can run through a map and smash everything. One problem with this build though, as you might have noticed when I was going over my gear, is that I have 0 base MF practically, which means you're only relying on the magic find from the map, which can get you to decent amounts of MF, but if you're definitely looking for like a efficient map magic finder, I don't know if this one's like necessarily the best choice. I mean, you can definitely go efficient mapping items. Wow, that is some scary stuff actually. Holy moly. We got some auras and crap. Ooh, hello. That is interesting. Alrighty. Cool. Well, anyway, I think you guys get the idea. I didn't have super high amounts of DR, and I also don't have a curse immunity removal, so in general, I don't want to necessarily engage anything with too many auras too often. Like I said, if you're doing mapping, you probably want maybe Crown of Ages even as a helm. And maybe even a cultist. I guess you could use a cultist glove, and then you can get some curse duration reduction items on your gear. Just something I forgot to mention. You can definitely go curse immunity for mapping, but I was a little squeamish at engaging that though. Yeah, dolls, they had dual aura, you could take a lot of damage. No time flat. Oh wait, what? There we go. I get both of them spirits out there. Alright, now we have max Feral Rage stacks, which is 5 stacks. And then just use Fury most of the time. Be very careful that you don't accidentally untransform, so keep that werewolf button where you're not going to accidentally press it. That can get you killed very easily. Well, the game lagged out there. It kind of sucks for a demo purpose, but that's okay. We can just do another map. And you can see that with even higher DR or like curse immunity and whatnot, like you can be very safe doing this as well in hardcore, even with 2 hands. And like if you get some extra summons or you put some extra points into summons in case you want to make your bear tanky or something. Providing something else that the dudes will like to hit. Thing I forgot to put there is the Curian Vines, so I can actually have more sustain right now. Which is kind of nice. See, you can see his damage is crazy. I practically one-shot everything. I mean, it's just... It's definitely nice. But you can also see that he's not like the fastest mapper in the universe. There's builds that can hit more monsters faster, right? He's pretty fast though. I would say that he's definitely at the high end of A tier when it comes to mapping. But he's definitely an S tier Uber Killer. Blowing away the competition and being the strongest Uber Killer I've ever created. Which is why we're going to show that off pretty soon here. Actually, I want to gather some juice. Kill a lot of Ubers. I've already killed like 30, 40 standard Ubers with them. And also Uber Ancients. Sometimes you need juice. Juice definitely make it a bit easier. This fool's a monster though, for sure. He makes a lot of content look very easy. But mapping isn't even his strong point, and to be honest, this build isn't even like fully tooled for mapping. It's kind of a jack of all trades though, so yeah, I can do this to some extent. Definitely doesn't have as much magic find either as some of my other builds, so. Yeah, so. Pretty good stuff here. Just having that amp proc too every once in a while on Atmos is good. You can definitely go Metal Grid though. Like I said, there's definitely other options you can use here. You can just go Saracens if you don't want to rely on it at all. One cool thing though is that if I swap to my CTA slot here, I can also use Battle Cry. And so I can further lower physical res of the monsters I'm hitting. But yeah, it's pretty monstrous stuff. Let's see if we can kill the map boss, just to give you guys a taste of just how much single target damage this fool does. Yeah, he just steamrolls through everything. And what's crazy is I can swap out my weapon here, and you can see that his damage is still nutty. I don't even need a crazy weapon. Still one-shotting everything. So you don't even need like an insane non-eth weapon with jewels or anything. You just need some shields. A Windhammer and some ED. Auras, and he crushes. I don't even have all my shape-shifting charms down here because I'm mostly right now focusing on a combination of res and damage. But yeah, it's crazy. More damage, more max damage charms, max damage small charms. And he doesn't. And one of these charms is a max damage large charm, which is kind of cool. As you can see though, not a big difference. His damage is crazy. Don't feel like you need a crazy weapon to achieve this. Definitely don't. That goes for the Ubers too, even though, you know, it's always cool to demo it with the slightly faster approach. And since the vines nor the spirits don't die, it's just really good just to have them on hand, you know. Yeah, you can just run through the map, smashing everything. Okay. Alright, where's that boss at? Go on. Didn't even stand a chance. Anyway. I think you guys can see what she's capable of, and in any of those maps that are listed on my loot filter as having physical as being a strong element, he's going to be very powerful in those. So, you know, if I just, like, hover over some maps here, you can see that he's going to be very strong in Throne of Insanity. It's going to be a dangerous area, though, unless you have a lot of DR or Curse immunity, things like that, especially when you don't have a shield. But you can definitely pull it off. Honestly, this build is actually better without a shield. Like, always, no matter what, because the two-handed weapons just vastly outperform the one-handed weapons, especially when you need a lot of attack speed on a shape-shifting build. So yeah, there's a lot of maps where physical is at least decently strong, and you can see that he's definitely capable of it to be very powerful in all kinds of areas. There's definitely some areas though where he's definitely weak though, so definitely keep that in mind. All right. Next up, we're gonna try an exercise in killing the Ubers. So, hopefully the server doesn't crap out again in the case of the Sanatorium map. Let's do Ubers. This is definitely what most people, I think, came for and what people wanted to see. We're not gonna pre-buff against the first one here. So the first one is just gonna be Uber Ancients. And Uber Ancients can be done on a mapper. However, warning, if you get hit by some of the physical damage from Talik or Korlik, or if you get hit by the lightning from Madoc, it hurts really bad. And I definitely recommend having some stacked light res or maybe even light sorb in there if you're going to solo it, not do it in a group, because Madoc hits incredibly hard. The fact that he even does as much damage as he does to this character, I'm actually going to use High Lords against them because in a lot of cases, you can kill them so fast that the amp doesn't matter, so having the extra deadly strike might be nice. I think it's a little better, but then again, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of them are pretty close in power overall, so I wouldn't think too much of it, honestly. All right, so as a matter of fact, you know, we could even use this if we wanted to. We can just pump up our damage even more. So you gotta use these relics of the ancients are cubed using the sigils, one sigil from each tier map. Sigil of Korlik, Madoc, and Talik. You cube this up in the cube, relic of the ancients, and then you go over here and you pop this, and then you're good to go. Now, they give you just a huge loot pinata. I got a Death's Web, 2 Ashutas. I would actually say this is a really good way to get loot. If you have a bunch of sigils unused and you're capable of killing them, and you're confident you're not going to die or something, they can be a bit dangerous. I would say they're definitely 3 times more dangerous than the normal Ancients, Hell Ancients. So you definitely want to make sure you're prepared for the damage or you avoid the damage completely while you kill them. They don't seem all that much tankier, to be honest, though, but they definitely seem more dangerous. And it definitely can help you level up as well in Players 8. I wouldn't say their experience is very significant, though, in Players 1. It's mostly the loot you're going for. We definitely found a Vexrin, though, Death's Web, 2+3 Ashutas, Gore Riders, all kinds of cool stuff doing this. I did like 40 sets of them or something. I just had a lot stored up from mapping. And, yeah, it's going to be good to go. So just make sure you just pre-buff your stuff there. If you can also choose to only do one. We're gonna do all three though because this character is a monster, so it doesn't really matter. And then I'm gonna click this, get our life leech up with Feral Rage, and bam, there you go. As you can see though, they do a lot of damage to a character that can tank. So make sure you have at least some DR. Make sure that you have at least maybe some stacked res, maybe some overcapped res as well from some maximum res, especially lightning. Maddock was doing most of that damage there. Maddock hurts. And sometimes he kills the Mercenary, I've found. As you can see, there's a giant loot pile. In this case, we got Gimmer Shred, Worldstone Shard, and a whole ton of charms, which is interesting. So yeah, I mean, definitely a lot of cool things though. My loot filter doesn't filter out a lot of these particular items, so sometimes it can be a little bit difficult to see them on the ground, but you can always make it more strict though. Oh my goodness. Of course, it's never a problem in maps, it's only a problem here, so. You get a Gimmer Shred as well. Nice. We'll slam it, let's go. Beautiful, Skull Rend. That's we rended that one right up. Put it through the wood chipper. Okay. School Riot. Oh baby. So yeah, as you can see, this character is insanely strong. I destroyed Uber Ancients like nothing. So that's just one small demonstration of his power. Now we're gonna go do some minor Ubers here. And then we're gonna do the big Ubers, and that will conclude the demos, and or the Uber Tristram, I should say. And then, yeah, can be confident making this build. He's a beast. I definitely, like I said, you know, if you're doing like declone or something, definitely make sure you put like use something like that. You know, maybe stack some Vexrins in it, and you'll be good to go. There's just a lot of damage to be had, and a lot of good stuff to be had just in general. Let's see here though. I think we don't need these anymore, at least for demoing purposes. I'm gonna put those away. Alright. Cool. Alright, and let's go and do mini Ubers. So mini Ubers, just put the keys in the cube and then go at them. Did we? No, we have to. Whenever there's a portal made in the game, I don't. Maybe you can make the key portals because they're not the same. In Uber Ancients and similar areas like Uber Tristram and like Declone and Wrathmon, you can't make TPs to leave the area. The only way to leave the area is to leave the game, and then you can't re-enter because you left the game. You basically surrendered. So you have to stay in the area itself. You can only make one of those TPs per game, except I think that goes for any red portal though. I think maps also can't be made. I don't actually know. There's just a whole bunch of portals. In general though, I think it's just best to make a new game. I haven't done thorough testing on all the different portal combinations you can make in one game, but I think it's safe to say that it doesn't really matter too much. Alright, sweet. And I do recommend transforming on your plus skill swap, so make sure you transform on your plus skill swap. Okay. Anyway, we're gonna go kill the Uber bosses pretty easily here. Kill Uber bosses. I could have also done this on the Uber Ancients, but if you swap real quick, you can get a nice battle cry and help increase your damage for a bit on the Uber, and then bam. If you get Amp on top of that, from Atma's there, you can see we just crush him. He dies in like a millisecond. Now you can use any combination of organs still in Season 5, unlike in Vanilla where you cannot. So again, maybe you're careful not to untransform. That is something that's actually almost killed me before on this character. Accidentally pressing the werewolf button again. That's probably the most dangerous thing you can do in this build. Besides maybe attempting to face tank without, with Amp and without enough DR against multiple auras or things like that. That's pretty dangerous too. But yeah. Now, of course, these mini Ubers, unlike in Vanilla, can be anywhere in these areas. There's like certain areas, like there's a, usually if you find a left-facing tile compared to the entrance tile in Vanilla, they always spawn there. Also, Izzy always spawns at the very end of the area. Alright, in this case though, found her somewhere in the middle. Pretty typical of her. Cast Battle Cry once before I engage, but after that I don't really bother because it takes longer to switch weapons, cast Battle Cry, than just killing her. So, there you have it. In the very beginning though, it definitely feels a little bit faster though. Getting that negative Fizz Res on there. Just negative 11 Fizz Res on this level of Battle Cry, so it's definitely not insignificant, but as you can see, Lilith is just crushed. This build's just nuts. It's just a nutty Uber killer, honestly. He's just crazy. As you can see with the Life Leech, sustain my huge amount of health and the fact that I do have a lot of flat PDR, MDR, and decent DR, really makes this character, despite being two-handed and melee, makes him pretty safe and hardcore in general. I haven't had too many near incidents of the monsters themselves killing me besides the Uber Tristram bosses, but that's normal. They do a lot of damage. You definitely gotta watch Uber Tristram boss damage. But as you can see, the mini Ubers really aren't a challenge for us. You go down practically without a fight. Practically. So just need 3 of each key, T keys, destruction keys, and H keys. You can even get them through that map event, Spire of Darkness event, which is really cool. And of course you can just farm them from the key bosses like in D2R, but there's also Blood Raven, Blood Witch the Wild, and Izzy that also drop the keys in addition to Nillothok, Countess, and Summoner. I like personally the ones I like to farm on most builds, the ones that seem the fastest, seem like Blood Witch the Wild or Summoner. I'd say Blood Raven's a lot easier to get to than Countess, like by a lot. And then Izzy or Nillothok, it kind of also depends on your preference, so. There's no teleport restrictions too, so you can use a Sorceress. That's what I've done for a lot of keys, and it works out just fine. Alright, so one thing to note here is we need to combine the organs using a key into a Pandemonium Talisman, which is what those are. As you can see, we're kind of prepared to do more Ubers later, which is nice. But we're just going to combine these into one right now. And then we're going to make a new game. Now, this is going to be Uber Tristram. Uber Tristram, you really need to make sure you have certain stats online, kind of like Declone and Wrathma. You're gonna, like Declone, you need a lot of, at least the 90 max fire res, and if you plan on tanking any Novas, you're gonna want Cold Sword and maximum cold res. It's kind of the same, and Wrathma, you want the maximum poison res and maximum cold res, and you want res to survive. Additional res to survive the lower resistance as well. But as you can see here, though, in general, though, we're going to stack our res even further, so I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. Need this GC here instead of one of the shape-shifting GCs, and then bam. So you're gonna want at least 50 stacked lightning res. So you need at least 50 more lightning res than the maximum lightning res you currently have. I do recommend having in the 80s of lightning res and light sword against Uber Mephisto, or he will hurt you. Very bad. As a matter of fact, if you don't have stacked lightning res and he drops you, like, I'd say below 60 light res, you're in one-shot territory. Even with over 3,000 health. So, yeah, don't do that. Make sure you have your maximum light res and you're good to go. These shape-shifting GCs are good too. We're also going to pre-buff with Demon Limb in this case, just to give us a bit more attack rating. Doesn't really hurt. And we also have a Dwarf Star swap, which I would actually consider a better ring than Nature's Peace, considering that our cold res isn't stacked, which would be good against Bale, or like the fire res isn't stacked high enough to survive the lower resist from Bale. This is solid against Mephisto, especially the light res, which is, you definitely need the light res, but the other two are like, you know, still have like 60 cold res against Mephisto. Bale resistances are kind of meh. They're pretty blessed, like in the 50s, 30s, and whatnot. And that means the maximum res we have here isn't going to matter against Bale. So in that case, I'd rather just have more life, and then this also has attack rating on it, and MDR, and has Fire Sword against Diablo. So let's swap out Nature's Peace with this as well. For Bale and Diablo. Nature's Peace, though, is going to be better, in my opinion, against Mephisto. And then we can just run the other ones. So yeah, there's definitely other options. Cool. Let's... Yeah, another thing is you could, you could also run, like, Wisp Projector for Lightning Sword, too, especially if you don't have Spirit Keeper. So there's all kinds of things you can do, but we're gonna run it like this here, and let's see. Definitely stack your cube full of juves no matter what. If your build's a little bit weaker than this one, it's gonna take a bit longer, especially if you have a slightly weaker weapon. So make sure you have as many juves as possible. I'm gonna bring these Shapeshift GCs and the Demon Limb as well to pre-buff though. You might ask, why am I pre-buffing with Lifer Shapeshift GCs? Because I also plan to use them for other builds, including Shockwave, so this is a bit different. However, I'd say we're pretty good to go though for the time being. And let's see, is Wahid all good? I think so. Alright, I think we're actually ready to kill them. So, right-click the Pandemonium Talisman near the Blood Fountain, just like the Uber Ancients. The mini Ubers don't matter, you don't have to put them in any particular place, but you do need to use... Notice that I cannot teleport out, so yeah, you gotta bring everything with you, including the potions. The only way you're gonna be able to chicken in here is to save and exit, and that means you're gonna lose your organs and not be able to get a torch. You can get a torch, and you can also get Black Soul Stones, which have a decent chance of dropping. I think it's like somewhere between 15 and 20% per Uber. It seems to be consistent with what I've seen as well. And then I'm gonna swap out our charms real quick here. I think we've screwed it up a bit. Okay, yeah, that's fine. We can fix it. Alright, there we go. Alright, remember to turn to a werewolf on your plus skills. Okay. And then make sure to just check to make sure you still have that 50 overstacked light res against Mephisto. As you can see, though, our health is even higher now with that pre-buff because we pre-buffed Lycanthropy, basically. Which is pretty nice. You can check that, though. We're still at 133. Alright, all systems go. And you can see that with the pre-buff on the Demon Limb, 15,000 attack rating, 17,000 fury damage. Yeah, this character is going to hurt pretty bad. Now, one of the main challenges is getting the Mercenary to survive. He might not survive, he might just die. Sometimes he gets one shot, which is pretty unfortunate. I do recommend pulling Mephisto away from Bale. Do not get lower resisted and conviction unless you plan on having so much stacked res that you can tank both of them. Well, in that case, you kept the Mercenary alive with Juves. If you keep the Mercenary alive, then he'll give you a lot of damage with his auras. He's giving me almost like 4,000 damage, so like keeping him alive is nice. It's giving me a decent amount of attack rating too, about like 2,000 or so. So he kept him alive by feeding him juice with shift clicking it. And Diablo spawned in the house? Interesting, okay. Maybe we can just keep him in there then, and then we can just go for Bale. So I'm going to swap to the Dwarf Star, as I mentioned before. Make sure to refresh your bow after you kill one of them.
My brothers could not have died in vain.
Swap to Battle Cry, and then start whacking. Look at how fast he dies. He's being incredibly docile, actually. Bale usually fights a little bit harder than that. Alright. Nice. But you can see with the lower resist that our resistances are pretty bad, so you could definitely stack more res and be even safer. Against both Mephisto's conviction and his lower res though, you're gonna need crazy amounts of stack res. We're talking like 100 plus. So make sure you definitely separate Bale and Mephisto at the very least. Also, you're going to want a ton of stacked fire res if you're planning on being lower resisted against Diablo, so you should also separate them. Diablo though, same thing. And you could have more people into the game just before you kill the last one to get more standard heroes if you want. Kept them alive, and bam. That's it. That's how easy this is. He makes it look effortless. This build is just crazy, crazy strong. What can I say? I mean, he really makes it look easy.
Good day.
It's really, really incredibly easy stuff, honestly, overall. Alright, anyway. We got one standard of heroes, because there's only me in the game, and let's check out the torch. It is a, I'm gonna guess, maximum sword torch. Well, that's not a max sword torch, but it's not even that great of a torch, honestly. It's 39 vitality, 12 res. It's okay. I'm sure there's someone out there who might want it as a free torch, even, so you never know. You have some spare paladin torches to give away, which is awesome. But yeah, anyway. GG. Guys, beasts. That's pretty much it. We'll try to put all the timestamps below so you guys can easily navigate this guide. I hope you guys learned a lot about the Fury Druid and are inspired to make one. If he's killing those Ubers so fast, you'll also be proud to know that you can also kill Wrathma and Declan very fast as well. So yeah, he hurts really badly. He's a ton of fun. He just does a ton of damage. You can definitely do a Wolf Barb as well, using a Wolf Howl, and it's kind of a similar concept. So make sure to explore that as well. And it's going to be powerful in both softcore and hardcore. But yeah, check out this guide and the rest of my guides, including my ultimate farming guide on D2R on YouTube. You could also check out, of course, the Season 5 tier list that lists all the awesome Uber and starter builds, and of course ranks the top mapping builds. It ranks all of the mapping builds. It gives you a good idea of how they perform in the late game. Anyways, GG. S tier Uber Killer. Smasher. Smashes maps. He's just a beast. Just an awesome build. Can only hope it doesn't get nerfed too hard, right? You know, not over nerfed. I wouldn't be surprised if this build, because of how ridiculous it is for killing Ubers compared to most, gets nerfed at some point. But I'm hoping it doesn't. It's a lot of fun, very powerful. It might be the items itself, like the itemization, like Windhammer, if anything, but who knows. Anyway, guys, Dark Humility, over and out. Like and subscribe if you liked the video. See you guys next time. Peace, baby. Let's smash it.